If you've been watching the tariff threat from the United States, you've probably gotten a little bit of whiplash lately. Earlier today, Reuters reported that 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico would come into effect on March the 1st. An hour later, you had a White House spokesperson say no, they'd start tomorrow. Of course, that clip from Donald Trump, that was later this afternoon, confirming there is nothing Canada can do to avoid the tariffs, which will start tomorrow. But he will, quote, probably lower the oil tariff to 10%. So how should the federal government respond? Well, let's bring in the front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's a senior advisor at Spark Advocacy and North Star Public Affairs. Melanie Paradis is a former communications director to Aaron O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. Former Ontario NDP MPP Gurdatin Singh, he's now the vice president at Crestview Strategy. He's also the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and CTV News national correspondent Rachel Aiello. Rachel, you've been following this story the last couple of days.
Yeah, just a bit of whiplash.
How you doing? Yeah. I mean, like,
I'm still here.
It's kind of funny, like where we've landed now, because everybody I think is still waiting. Okay, what's going to happen tomorrow?
Frankly, like, I won't believe it until I see it, Mike. Like, we have been here and there and back and forth that until we get that announcement from Donald Trump tomorrow that the tariffs are in place and they are 25% and they're on this, I think that is also the kind of posture the federal government is taking. They are prepared and have been for Trump to impose tariffs as of his inauguration. That didn't happen. The day one threat was gone. And then we thought, oh, hey, maybe we're going to get a reprieve till March. Well, no. So the Prime Minister today did meet with his Canada-U.S. Relations Council. To me, it was notable that he made the definite point that we will retaliate, but he said it will hurt us. He made a point of saying, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The Canadian economy is probably going to be in for a rough ride over the next little while. So that was the most, to me, bracing for what is ahead comment that he's made so far.
Yeah. Sabrina, you're in Alberta, and of course, there was this whole question of a carve-out for oil. Now it seems like it's only going to be 10%. The federal government was also saying everything should be on the table, including limiting energy exports. What do you think that could do to a Team Canada approach if the federal government decides, you know what, we are going to make sure that we play that card of oil and gas?
I think it's a really tricky line to walk because of the importance of oil to both Alberta's economy and the Canadian economy, and the fact that I think Ms. Ambrose said earlier on this panel, like, you know, even to get oil over to Eastern Canada, it still needs to go through the United States. So having a really well thought out plan for that, I think, is important. But on the other hand, you've also seen that big oil execs in the United States, the heads of Chevron, the heads of ExxonMobil, and some of the others have said, drill, baby, drill. I don't think so. And so they are extremely dependent on our oil. Their refineries are tuned to Canadian and Albertan oil. And so they can't just turn the taps and all of a sudden, you know, oil's flooding out from Texas or from Oklahoma or the Gulf of America, Mexico, wherever it is. And so there is an opportunity to make it hurt for the Americans. And I think that, unfortunately, like, this is not the place I think Canada wanted to be in. I think we had a cooperative relationship. I think we got to make it hurt. And so I do think that that option has to be on the table. But I hope that there can be a cooperative relationship and agreement between, you know, Premier Smith and not only the Prime Minister, but the other premiers, right? Like, this is a whole of Canada problem.
Yeah, and Gurdatin, you've heard Doug Ford say, look, hey, let's cut off electricity or other critical minerals. François Legault wrote this letter in The Hill a couple of weeks ago saying to Donald Trump, reminding him that the lights are kept on or help to be kept on at Trump Tower because of Quebec electricity. Do you think Canada needs to look at that as well if they want everything to be on the table and really essentially make the Americans feel the pain?
100%. Trump is a bully. And we need to respond back with the way we know everyone should stand up to bullies. And that's how we need to respond back to Donald Trump right now. He has been using his posture, his position, and now his policy to bully Canadians. And he's now putting thousands and hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk. So we need to be prepared to respond with our own tariffs. And I think it's really important that we look at this as this is one of those moments where it's Canada first. I think what the NDP is putting forward federally really makes a lot of sense. This position of buy Canadian, build Canadian. We need to make sure workers are protected. We need to make sure that we're putting in supports to ensure that unionized workers are getting the supports they need, and we're expanding unionized work. this is the way that we push back. And above everything, we need to make sure that Trump feels this pain, that if he's going to exert tariffs upon us, that we're going to respond accordingly. And it should be across the board, including the very minerals that are required for different EVs. And, they rely on Canada for so many different resources, and we need to hit them where it hurts on every single angle right now.
Yeah, and Mel, I haven't seen you put on the cap just yet, so I guess no props this week. I mean, you can if you want, no. But if you reach for one as I'm asking you the question, I'm not gonna penalize you for it. But what do you think the Canadian government needs to do tomorrow, right out of the gate, depending on what we see? Is it a hit back harder type of scenario?
So I'm not going to put a hat on today because I think this is a really serious moment, and I'm actually really concerned for everyday Canadians and how they're going to be worrying right now about like the cost of groceries and how the cost of living is going to increase. What our politicians need to be focused on right now is the fact that Donald Trump said today that there will be no concessions. He's not looking for that. He's not looking for us to make a deal with him just yet. He alluded to maybe at some point, but right now, he's focused on this as a money-making exercise for the United States in order to pay down some of their deficit and their debt. Mm-hmm. The problem that Canada faces is that we have allowed ourselves to become an uncompetitive environment. We have allowed the Liberal government to spend the past 8-9 years making Canada uncompetitive. They've stopped building pipelines. They've stopped building railways, roads, ports, all of the critical infrastructure that we need to get our resources and our products to diverse markets. And they have tied our hands behind our back and made us completely reliant on the United States. And now we're in a mess. So we need Parliament to be recalled. We need our governments to get serious about how we're going to make Canada the most competitive jurisdiction in the world so that we have a fighting chance. It's going to be a hell of a year. It's going to be rough for a while. But if we're going to make sure this never happens again, we have to fix our regulations and we have to start building infrastructure like we never have before.
Yeah, and Mel, I take your point, but I think it is worth noting, and something that I wanted to mention to Ms. Ambrose. I mean, this government is the one that bought a pipeline.
It's like building a bridge to nowhere. I mean, they bought a pipeline. What are they doing with it? What's happening?
Fair point. Fair point, but they're also, they bought a pipeline looking at twinning it as well, and that is what they were trying to do to diversify. But anyways, something we can continue to talk about with or without caps, and I take your point that this is very serious, and that's why you didn't bring props today.